Now, back to your turn on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330.
All right, good afternoon. Welcome back to Your Turn. We have Speaker Gingrich on the line. Mr. Speaker, it's your turn.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing very well. I appreciate you joining us today. I want to let you know that I've been a longtime supporter of yours for many, many years, well over a decade. I have said that if I could appoint the President of the United States, and I couldn't appoint myself, that I would appoint you. And I can't appoint you, but I did vote for you on my way into work this morning.
Well, listen, thank you for doing that, and we're very, very gratified by all the Floridians who've been telling us all day long that they were voting for me as we went around the various polling places. And we had a great rally in Pensacola yesterday with volunteers and supporters. And obviously, as somebody who's very strong for national security, I have a real interest in Pensacola and in the strength of our military. And as a president, I will work very hard to keep the military strong.
Well, I hope you get that opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I could talk to you forever. Can you give me an idea of how much time you have for us?
We have about 5 or 6 minutes.
5 or 6, okay. All right. Well, let's start with this then. Obviously, the number one issue is we've got to fix the economy. What is it that President Gingrich will do to fix this economy?
Well, first of all, just firing Barack Obama will be a big step towards a recovery. You then have to repeal Obamacare, and you have to repeal the Dodd-Frank bill, which is killing small business and small banks and crippling the housing recovery. I think I would, on the very first day, sign an executive order to build the Keystone Pipeline, and that would begin to create jobs and turn around energy. I would also open up energy development on federal property so that you begin to lower the price of gasoline and produce additional American energy so we would not have to rely on Venezuela or Saudi Arabia or Iran or Iraq. That would help. And I think that if you look at newt.org, you'll see a whole series of specific proposals for a very dramatic tax cuts, including 12.5% corporate tax rates so we could liberate about $700 billion in profits overseas, 100% expensing so people could write off all new equipment in 1 year to make American workers the most productive and most effective in the world. And we would also be in a position to abolish the death tax permanently and to give individuals the choice of having a 15% flat tax, just one page if you want to use it, where you would just fill in this is how much you earned, this is how many dependents you have, and here's 15%, and that would be it. So we have some very bold ideas that we think would start the economy very dramatically.
Well, there are many reasons that jobs go overseas. Wages is a big consideration, but there are many other things. You've got environmental restrictions, you've got tax policy, you've got regulation, the ease of technology and transportation. There's lots of reasons jobs have gone overseas. What can you do as president to bring jobs back to the United States without imposing harmful protectionist policies?
Well, part of it, as I said, is to change the tax code to make us a much more competitive country, and that would include a zero capital gains rate so that people would pour hundreds of billions of dollars into the U.S. investment. But beyond that, on the regulatory side, in addition to repealing the Dodd-Frank bill, Obamacare, I'd also repeal Sarbanes-Oxley, which has been a very expensive red tape bill without producing many advantages. And I would replace the Environmental Protection Agency with a brand new Environmental Solutions Agency, which would have to apply common sense, take into account economic factors, and be more effective in terms of dealing with problems in a collaborative way with local communities instead of behaving like a Washington-based dictatorship. I would also modernize the Food and Drug Administration so that its mission would be to be in the laboratory, moving new ideas to the patient as rapidly as possible, rather than slowing it down and obstructing it. That would both create hundreds of thousands of high-value American jobs, and it would create an environment where we would be in a very, very good position to have medical costs decline as we had new and better medicines, and we'd save people's lives. They would live longer, live more independently, and be better off. So there are a series of steps like that we can take that will dramatically improve things.
Well, let me ask you a question about the legitimate role of the federal government. The voters are very eager to ask Washington to solve all their problems, and politicians in Washington are only too happy to oblige with solutions that don't ever really solve the problem anyway. But can you please cite for me a few examples where the proper answer would be that is not Washington's responsibility?
Sure. Look, first of all, I've asked Governor Rick Perry of Texas to head up a 10th Amendment implementation project which would enable us to return power back home, not just to Tallahassee, but to the state and local communities, and also to you as a citizen. I would abolish the Department of Energy, which has been a total failure. I would reduce the Department of Education very, very dramatically. I would question why we have a Department of Housing and Urban Development at this point in our history. I think you can go through and apply a concept called Lean Six Sigma, which our listeners can find at a site called Strong America Now. And I would go through step by step, and I would apply those concepts to the federal government. We think that would save at least $500 billion a year. So there are a lot of things we can do. There are 185 federal programs for dealing with the poor. That's 185 separate bureaucracies, 185 separate sets of red tape. All that requires state and local governments to create their own bureaucracies to fill out the paperwork for the federal bureaucracy. We propose block granting all of those into one program, sending the money back home and letting each state find its own solutions to helping the poor in a way that will expand creativity and experimentation and maybe get us to actually some breakthroughs in helping people leave poverty and enter prosperity. So now those are the kind of things that would really change Washington.
Let's talk about civil liberties for just a moment. New Year's Eve, President Obama signed into law the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2012 that Barack Obama himself, not that he's any bastion of honesty, but Barack Obama himself claimed that it gave him the authority to indefinitely detain American citizens without trial. And both U.S. senators representing Florida, both Rubio and Nelson, voted in favor of it, as did Congressman Jeff Miller, who represents the Panhandle. According to Jeff Miller, it does not give the president the authority to do that. What do you know about that? What's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I can't tell. There have been arguments in both directions on that. I have a group of lawyers looking at it. I do not want American citizens detained without due process. I think that's a very dangerous precedent, and I want to make sure that, in fact, is not what's happening in this case.
And how about the recess appointments that President Obama did when there was no recess?
Well, I think those are clearly unconstitutional and a violation of the law. And let me say, also, I'm very sympathetic with the Catholic Church, which has protested deeply about last week's provisions to impose on Catholic institutions a requirement to buy insurance, which goes against the religious beliefs of the Catholic Church. I think this administration is waging war on Christianity, and I think there's a good reason for people to be very upset and very concerned about it.
All right, final question for you. Can you clarify for us what your role was with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? I know you've described it as being a historian. Sure. You've advised you've advised them. Can you be more specific? What'd you do?
Sure. I gave them specific advice on two things: how to help the poor earn a house in a positive way, built on the Habitat for Humanity model, and how to explain government-sponsored enterprises. I also, in the only written documents that exist, said that they needed more regulation, not less. And in the only time I ever spoke to the Congress about Freddie Mac, there was in the New York Times in July of 2008, I told the House Republicans to vote no and not give them any additional money, the opposite of what some of these ads had implied. But I actually opposed them getting any additional money because I said they were the problem, not the solution.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate your time. I wish you the very best in your quest for the presidency. I look forward to your victory speech in Florida tonight and your big victory speech on November 6th.
Listen, thank you, and I look forward to campaigning this fall in Florida. I'll see you then.
I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate you joining us today on Your Turn. All right, 623-1330 is the number if you would like to join the conversation. We had to interrupt what we were doing to get Mr. Newt Gingrich on the air. We knew he'd call at some point. It was confirmed that he would. We just didn't know when, so that's why we dropped what we were doing when all of that came in. Back, though, to an open forum discussion. 623-1330 is the number. You pick the topic. We'll discuss it. Who did you vote for today and why? Maybe you can influence somebody who's going to be stopping at their polling place on the way home and kind of amplify the effect of your vote.